Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to be diving into this with you right now. Today, you and I are going to act as architects. We're going to build a massive, incredibly sturdy foundation of knowledge. You see, we live in a country that truly champions freedom and liberty, but, those ideas didn't just magically appear out of nowhere. They had to be designed, tested, and honestly fought for. So today, we're going to look at the very blueprints of American liberty, tracing our rights all the way back to their English roots and discovering how a biblical sense of justice literally framed the entire structure of our government. Okay, let's dive into this. Where did the American government actually come from? Well, it's really easy to think that one day in 1776, the Founding Fathers just sat down in a room, brainstormed for a few hours, and suddenly, boom, the United States government was born out of thin air. But actually, scratch that. That is entirely false. The true ideas that built our government had been brewing for hundreds of years before America was even a thought. So here is our game plan for today's lesson. 1. The Blueprint of Liberty. 2. 1215, the Magna Carta. 3. 1689, English Bill of Rights. 4. The Biblical Moral Compass. And finally, 5. Education, Morality, and You.
All right, Section 1. The Blueprint of Liberty. Every great structure has to start with a solid plan. Think about a massive skyscraper. You don't just start pouring concrete and stacking steel beams hoping it stays up, right? No way. Every strong structure needs a solid plan, a blueprint, drawn up long before the final building is ever constructed. The same is absolutely true for a strong nation. The United States government is the skyscraper, but the blueprint was drafted across the ocean, long before the builders got to work. Let's move to and see how this builds across our historical timeline. We start way back in 1215 with the Magna Carta. Then we jump over 400 years to 1689 with the English Bill of Rights. And finally, almost a century later, we arrive at 1787 with the U.S. Constitution. This just proves that the concepts of liberty we enjoy today weren't rushed. They took centuries to draft, to revise, and to finally get right.
Moving on to Section 2, 1215, the Magna Carta. It was definitely time to put some limits on royal power.
Okay, I want you to really picture this scene. It's the year 1215 in England. King John is on the throne, and frankly, he is severely abusing his power. He's doing whatever he wants, taking whatever he wants, and punishing people incredibly unfairly. Finally, his nobles have just had enough. They rebel against him and literally force him to sign a document called the Magna Carta. This document is the very first draft of our blueprint for freedom, and its core achievement is a concept known as the rule of law. This is, without a doubt, the most important vocabulary word of our lesson today. It's the simple but revolutionary idea that leaders must obey the law and no one is above it. Before the Magna Carta, the king basically was the law. If he said it, it happened. But this introduced a radical new idea. Even the king has to follow the rules.
So why does this matter so much? Because rulers cannot just do whatever they want. The Magna Carta did three incredible things. It limited kingly power, it protected the rights of the people, and it established firm legal boundaries. Think about how this laid the groundwork for American liberty. If you want to build a free society, the very first thing you have to do is make sure the people in charge can't just trample over everyone else. You absolutely have to limit their power.
Section 3, 1689, the English Bill of Rights. Time for a massive upgrade to those protections. Centuries later, the English decided their blueprint needed a major revision. They needed to make it even stronger. So they created the English Bill of Rights. This document expanded the protections of the Magna Carta, giving way more rights to the people and giving more power to the Parliament, which, by the way, was their group of elected lawmakers, rather than just leaving it all to the king. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly where America got its ideas. On one hand, you have the English Bill of Rights from 1689, guaranteeing fair trials, the right to petition the government, and freedom from cruel punishments. And on the other hand, the U.S. Bill of Rights, written over a century later, mirrors these exact same freedoms. The right to a fair trial, the right to petition, the ban on cruel and unusual punishment. The direct, undeniable link between the specific freedoms granted in 1689 and the ones we enjoy as Americans today is right there in the text.
Which brings up a really fascinating question. Why in the world did the American colonists study these old English documents so closely when they were preparing to declare independence? The answer is simple. They needed proof. When they began dreaming of an independent America, they needed solid proof that liberty could actually be protected by law. Without these earlier examples, the colonists might never have known it was even possible to successfully set limits on a ruler's power. These documents gave them the sheer confidence to build their own nation.
Section 4. The Biblical Moral Compass.
Let's dig into the underlying structure of all of this.
We've talked a lot about blueprints, right? Well, a perfectly drawn blueprint is completely useless if the foundation you are building on is unstable, or worse, totally immoral. The historical documents provided the legal structure for sure, but where did the underlying moral structure come from? It came from an ancient biblical understanding of justice. By me, kings reign, and rulers issue decrees that are just. Now, that is a powerful statement. It reminds us that true, legitimate authority isn't just about having raw power over people. It must be guided by wisdom and justice. Rulers are actually supposed to issue decrees that are right, fair, and good for the people.
So the crucial point is this. The historical laws we just learned about align perfectly with this biblical perspective of what a good government actually looks like. From a moral standpoint, a good government must limit the abuse of power. It must rigorously protect human dignity, and it must create laws that are fair and just for everyone. You know, the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights were political documents, absolutely, but they were aiming at a moral goal, protecting the God-given dignity of the individual from a tyrannical ruler.
So, I want you to think about this. Why is it so important for both leaders and regular citizens to be accountable to just laws? Let that sink in for a second. Think about it. If only citizens follow the law, well, you have tyranny. If neither leaders nor citizens follow the law, you just have total chaos. Accountability across the board, meaning everyone obeying just moral laws, is literally the only way a society can truly experience freedom and peace. Section 5. Education, Morality, and You. This is where we talk about the choices you make.
We've covered kings, rebellions, centuries of history, and grand philosophies of justice. But honestly, none of that history really matters if we don't connect it directly to our own personal choices. So, to make sure we've locked in these historical facts, let's briskly summarize what you need to take away. 1. The rule of law means no one is above the law. 2. We've seen 1689 freedoms like fair trials and no cruel punishments. 3. We know royal power must be limited to protect individual rights. 4. We know the Magna Carta kicked this whole thing off in 1215. And 5. The connection to today? These documents are the literal blueprint of the U.S. Constitution. With these core historical facts, you now fully understand the foundation. But mastering the history just isn't enough. The HeroesMart Academy Godly Learner series poses a really critical idea. Education without morality will hurt. What's the point of being smart and supposedly educated and continuing to make bad choices that hurt? This is profoundly true. You can memorize every single date of the Magna Carta, you can recite the entire Bill of Rights from memory, but if you don't have the moral compass to use that knowledge properly, what's the point? Knowledge without a foundation of goodness and morality just leads to bad choices.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the ultimate goal here, which is peace. Romans 8:6-7 promises peace of mind to everyone who keeps his or her mind spiritual. When you intertwine your education with a deep, moral mindset, when you truly understand that the laws of liberty are designed to protect human dignity, you don't just become smart, you achieve true peace of mind. Which leaves us with something incredibly important to consider as we wrap up today. If the blueprint of American liberty was painstakingly drafted over centuries, built on a foundation of the rule of law and an unwavering biblical moral compass, how sturdy is that foundation today? Are we still holding our leaders and ourselves accountable to those same unshakable principles of justice, or are we letting the cracks form in the very foundation of our freedom?